WOR Radio in there I am at WOR Radio in New York, and a creative producer here at the Sarasota Film Festival. Thank you so much for coming to today's career conversation. There are some artists who always surprise us with their skill and their warmth and their humanity. And I'm reminded of a scene in the 1972 film version of the play 1776, the musical 1776. There's a great moment where a young woman comes out to a window. She's wearing this beautiful dress, and a couple of characters, no less than John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, look up at her and they say, "She is even more magnificent than I recall." I think that absolutely describes our guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, Blythe Danner.
You can't be talking about me.
No, and here she happens to be right here. That was a great little leap there. That's a great
Well, luckily, I had a lot of help. I know I need more and more of that every day. I was stretching before I came on, but I still didn't quite do it as gracefully as I wanted to.
Got to be in shape here at the Sarasota Film Festival to get to the stage, right? Well, thank you so much for coming back. You were here a couple of years ago with the amazing I'll See You in My Dreams in 2015.
Yeah.
You're here this year with this phenomenal film, The Tomorrow Man. There's so much to talk about. I want to just jump, obviously, to the very beginning, though, and talk about, you've got your own talent. Your own family is extraordinarily talented. Your brother's an opera singer. Did you grow up in an artistic household? What was the relationship with your parents and your family to the arts as you were growing up?
My parents met singing at the Choral Art Society in Philadelphia. They both had glorious voices, and they weren't. They never became professional. My dad was actually known as the singing banker in Philadelphia because he did a lot of oratorio work, and he was just wonderful. And my mother and he would do a lot for the PTA. They were very active in the community. And Dad, I'm afraid I inherited this from my father. I have trouble, and always have had trouble with my lines, learning my lines. I can't attribute it to old age. I wish I could. And so Dad really, they would do a lot of the Jeanette Donald, Nelson Eddy, Jeanette MacDonald, Sweetheart, 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 all of those. And Dad would write them on his cuffs, the lyrics. And when he didn't do that, Mom would whisper them to him, the lyrics. And I thought, oh, of all the things to have to inherit. But he was extraordinary. He could do the Messiah, Handel's Messiah. There's that very difficult recitative where he could do that whole thing. Every valley shall be exalted. He could do the whole thing in one breath, which was his great claim to fame in Philadelphia. So yes, we grew up. My brother was with the Metropolitan Opera Workshop. My eldest brother, my half-brother, Bill Mennick, was 12 generations of violin makers in Philadelphia. So as a child, I used to sit on, I was told I sat on Eugene Ormandy's knee and Oistrakh and Menuhin. They'd all come to the Mennick Violin Shop to get ready for their concerts at the Academy of Music. And actually, my niece, his daughter has been a long-time resident of Sarasota, and last night she was out of town, she had to be gone, but my nephew, Hank Taplinger, was my date last night. So the Taplingers have lived here for a long time.
Oh, that's great. I love that you have a connection to Sarasota.
Yeah, I love coming back.
Yeah.
Just because everybody is so welcoming always.
We love having you here. In the 60s, after you graduated from Bard, there's such a great litany of roles that you have, but I want to jump ahead past The Miser, which is of course extraordinary, but also to your first Tony Award, which is Butterflies Are Free. And there is a notion of Butterflies Are Free that it's such a beautiful sort of evocation of the 60s. And I can imagine that you tackling that role in 1969, sort of, did it feel to you like, in a way, like this beautiful sort of, kind of apotheosis of all the things that the 60s were about, this character, Jill, and all the things you represented in that play?
Yeah, pretty much so. I mean, I made my entrance in underwear, which was, I guess that was after, was that after, what was the one? Hair?
Hair, yeah.
I get all my chronology mixed up, but I remember my grandmother being in the audience opening night, and I appear in my underwear, and she went, oh! She was so shocked. But yeah, I mean, it was a very sweet play. Keir DeLay and I and Eileen Heckert, and we had a lot of. There was an active. We smoked cigarettes as everybody did in the '60s, And Keir played a blind boy who I come in and have an affair with eventually, and he's not supposed to see anything, and I'm talking away with my cigarette, and it drops on a pillow, and the ash is on the pillow burning, and I don't notice it because it's very low. It's over here, and Keir's kind of going, because he saw it up, and of course he can't see it. He's not supposed to see it. So, but thank goodness there was a practical sink on stage. So when I finally did notice it, I ran over to the sink and turned the water on. But there are all kinds, there are all sorts of things happen on stage that are usually fun accidents, not always. I was I played, actually I was pregnant with my daughter when I did 12th Night at Lincoln Center. And the opening night, Moses Gunn, the actor, the first line is, "If music be the food of love, play on." And dear Moses started out, "If food be..." And we all froze, and everybody sort of turned up stage. We all kind of lost it. But he recovered. I mean, you have to be prepared for anything. And it makes it exciting, actually. Right, exactly. Be on your toes. Yeah.
What did it feel like to win that Tony Award in 1969 at such a young age? What was that like?
Oh, I didn't. This is a terrible thing to say, to sound ungrateful, but it's sort of. How do I say this? I was grateful, of course, but having been a company person, and I've never been very ambitious. I've always loved, what do you want to do? What are we going to do? When I was at Williamstown all those years. So it was uncomfortable. I remember thinking, ooh, this is terrible. Why I have to stand out here by myself and make a speech, and I forgot half the people I was supposed to thank. So the whole thing was a little disconcerting. And then the night after I won the Tony, I had to make this entrance in my underwear, and it was all timed out with a sort of physical bit. Yeah. And when I came on stage, I got this huge applause and cheering, and it messed up my entrance. Oh. So can you imagine being such a kind of sourpuss? I was not proud of that moment, but I did not react terribly well. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, as you moved into television and films in the 70s, all of that training and all that sort of immediacy of the stage gave you so much background to fall back on. But I wonder if you kind of had to develop these new skills as you had a camera in front of you and worked in film and television. What was that like?
It was awful. Well, again, I don't even sound such a Debbie Downer, but it was hard for me to adapt to film because I love the freedom of the stage, and all those unexpected things happen, and you have to use every facility to kind of think ahead and recover. And in film, there's the camera, and it took me years to feel comfortable. So I never thought I was a film actress, and it's really only late in life that I've gotten more of a variety of interesting roles. And actually, I'll See You in My Dreams for me was a real landmark, because the first time I had the lead in a movie, and I remember turning it down at first. I said, how could I possibly be in every scene? I've never done that. I'm a supporting player, usually. I mean, in stage more leading things. Yeah. So that was, but luckily Brett Haley, this young fellow who's been here a few times with different films, and my agent pushed me to do it. I'm so grateful that I did. It was a joy.
I'm so glad you, after watching that film again in preparation for this, but the fourth or fifth time I've seen it. Such a beautiful film, and there's so much
better than I am.
And we'll be talking more about that because there's so many layers to that film that are so resonant and so poetic. But what's interesting about television that I've heard, and I wonder if this is the case for you, and even when you did the Adam's Rib series with Ken Howard and that great MASH episode with Alan Alda, that there is that kind of a quick camaraderie that develops, obviously, amongst actors, even if the shooting time is quick and it doesn't have the rehearsal time of the stage. Bonds are formed very quickly, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm still great friends with Alan Alda and his wife. He's the loveliest guy. But that's true. I know when my husband did two shows that I think a lot of you here, I think, may remember. One was The White Shadow, and one was St. Elsewhere. And he was given the first what's that word? Word for promoting both minorities and women in our diversity award. And he was so proud of that because I remember when he died, Denzel Washington, who had been a company member on St. Elsewhere, just praised him to the sky and said, Bruce did something no producer does. He let me out for every single movie I was offered because there was a large enough company that they could work around him. But very few people went to that, stuck out themselves on a limb like that. Producers, I missed a couple of good roles because the producer said, forget about it. You're signed on to this. We're not giving you that day to do that. And I think Bruce was so aware of that. But so many of the fellas on The White Shadow became successful directors, and some of the women, he was just extraordinary. He got the Peabody Award, too, for St. Elsewhere. So he was really proud of that.
Both those shows are extraordinary and
But
very
he did,
important
getting back to you, sorry, he did a few films, but he said, oh, God, I like TV so much better, because my daughter's the same way. They're very, very quick, and I'm the slower one. My son is more methodical, but they just, wow, our house is on fire, and he just thought, I can't stand sitting around waiting for lighting on a movie set. It takes forever. He just wanted to move on, and so he did.
Yeah, we were talking last night about The Great Santini, which I really love, and which is an extraordinary film. If anybody has not seen The Great Santini, I urge you to get it on streaming right now. It's available. Let's have a round of applause for The Great Santini. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh. Bob Duvall, Michael O'Keefe and Bob Duvall, they were both nominated for Oscars. They were fantastic. Great to work with both of them.
Yeah. And that was an important role in so many ways, too, because it was also Pat Conroy's mother in some ways that you were portraying, right?
That's right, who I actually met, and she sort of helped me with my Southern accent. But she also said, which I thought was so interesting, because they were divorced, the Great Santini was such a powerhouse, and she said there's nothing as bad as a Marine pilot without a war, because the family becomes the enemy, and they just. And I've had so many young men come up to me and say, "That was my father." Thank you for that film, because it's that dynamic, I guess, was quite normal.
Yeah, it's unique, absolutely. And right after that, then you did Betrayal on Broadway with Roy Scheider and Raul Julia, which is another kind of dynamic, and by Pinter. And I would imagine that with all of these sort of strong personalities, Duvall's another one. There's obviously these levels of kind of give and take. And what was it like approaching Betrayal on Broadway with all three of you there?
Oh my gosh! Well, both of them are gone, sadly, both Raul and Roy. That was such a gift, because I was actually directed by Harold Pinter. Sir Peter Hall was doing another production in London and had to leave us quite often. And I was mad. I was in love with Harold, and he loved women. He'd always say, "Come sit on my lap, Blythe." I'd say, "Oh no, Harold, I can't do that." But he loved women. He loved, a lot of people dismissed that play back then, but now it's being heralded as one of his great, because it was a true love story. And I just adored him. That was fun. And Raul especially, it was like playing catch. Every night we would try to find something new, and that's what's great. It wasn't the longest run, and I sadly got pneumonia during it, so had to leave. But every night was a joy, because he'd give me a line a certain way, and then I'd catch it and give it back a certain way. It was really that kind of energy that is, you always pray you'll have with your fellow players on stage, and it's rare.
In 1986, you played another very famous person's mother in Brighton Beach Memoirs, which is a wonderful film that I love. Gene Sachs directed that, and one of the things I love is that you and Judith Ivey in that film have such a great rapport, and there's such a great sort of sense of it. It takes place in 1937 of these women sort of really kind of holding their home together, two sisters, and with the great rapport that you have in that film.
Well, I loved doing it, but we were criticized for not being Jewish. Because neither Judith and I were, and we were. I said, but it doesn't matter that we're not Jewish. It was so much. It was my grandmother, my German grandmother. I just used her as my role, but I guess we weren't. you know, ethnic enough in terms of a lot of the critics who. But I think it did I think it did well. I don't think it was a boffo hit, but Jonathan Silverman was a joy to work with, and the whole thing. And of course, we had what's his name, the writer?
Oh, Neil Simon.
Neil Simon was with us all the time. Oh boy. Well, I'm 76, so even though I'm guilty of this even when I was 20.
Was Neil with you the whole time
worse.
on the set?
Yes.
There? Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, and Gene, and you know, Gene was so funny, and I'd say, "How do I do this line?" And he would he would give us some line readings, which I never mind getting.
Yeah.
I figure if somebody knows better than I'm going to pick it up.
Right. Especially with the Neil Simon play, I would imagine, because obviously the patter is there's a specific rhythm, obviously, to all of his work, that whether he or Gene kind of gave you, like, this is sort of how this needs to go, because the next line's going to be funny, or the next line's going to be a straight line.
Exactly.
Yeah, right,
It was a real lesson. The same thing, really, with the Meet the Parents series, those three. I would just sit there watching, you know, Ben and
Robert De Niro.
Bob and Dustin and Barbara in the second one, and it was such a lesson, because even though I love doing comedy. People say, you know, comedy's harder than drama, and I think it is actually, because that timing just has to be perfect. But I love it when you keep learning. You're never too old to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to jump to those films. I'm going to come back to the timeline that we're talking about, because in those films, and Meet the Parents and Meet the Fockers, which is obviously a title one must say, you are sort of there has to be, you know, there always has to be sort of the anchor to keep you going within the comedy, and obviously, especially in Meet the Fockers, where Barbara and Bob and Ben Stiller are also so over the top. You're there still being funny, but you're the one who's kind of anchoring it to reality in some ways, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I've been told. I hope that's the case. It was just fun playing off of them, and their little reactions that I didn't even know were registering that they used, which was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah. So after Brighton Beach in about '88, you in Streetcar Named Desire, you brought this other sense to Blanche Dubois that I'm interested in hearing. What did you sort of discover about her that maybe other performances hadn't caught, or you wanted to bring to the fore that maybe nobody else had thought about with that performance of Streetcar Named Desire?
Well, our director was Nikos Sakaropoulos. Did anybody see the movie last night? So hilarious, wasn't it? Also heartbreaking and touching, and with Greg Kinnear. You have to see it. It's great, and the mispronunciation of that Greek name. But Nikos Sakaropoulos, who they used to jokingly say meant cheats at checkers, which I'm sure isn't true. But he was a phenomenal director, and we had all these great actors have gone. I was at Williamstown for about 20 years. I go with the children in the summers, because it was Chekhov and Williams, and they could go to summer camp and have a great time. But Chris Walken played Stanley, and I would go anywhere to work with Chris. I mean, he was the funniest Stanley ever. But he was also, what I love about Chris is he's so true to what he feels. And I guess he didn't find me attractive. I know he likes me, but when Stanley has to rape Blanche, he just sort of didn't want to. So every night I'd have to go, "No, Stanley, no," sort of push myself into him. But as I say, I'd go anywhere, because you can't get angry with Chris, because he's just so true to himself. And he is true to the piece ultimately. It's just he gets there and we did another reading of an A.R. Gurney piece, a two-hander with, do you know the name of that? You're so knowledgeable.
I can't remember.
You know better than I, my career. But it's done everywhere with
Love letters? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
No?
Somebody say that?
At the same time.
Yeah,
All right, there you go.
perfect. But we did that in New York, and Mrs. Gurney was there, and Pete was still very much alive, but he wasn't there that night. Pete Gurney, A.R. Gurney, and Chris refused to. The very last thing is that character's supposed to break down and sob. Yeah. And in rehearsal, Chris just said, I don't know, I'm not going to do it. And we got to it, and he just let loose. It was heartbreaking. So he's the kind of actor that, feels his way, and then he's he's there.
Yeah.
But Mrs. Gurney was so funny. She said afterwards, "Oh, no, Chris can't play that role. He's a bad boy, and this boy is a good boy." Oh. And of course, he's not a bad boy. He just has this extraordinary range, and he seems, that's the energy he gives, is that he'll, you know, he is wild.
He is wild.
Yeah.
When you come back to authors or to plays that you have known, that you've performed, whether it's Chekhov or Pinter or Williams, do you like to find like nuances in them that maybe you didn't see the last time you performed the play or last time you knew the play?
Well, you know, I don't think I'll ever do that again. We did two productions of Tonight at 8:30, Noel Coward, who was so wonderful to work on. But we did it at Williamstown. Michael Greif directed it, who has a slew of hits on Broadway all the time. And it was really, really funny. And it was such a good time that I said, let's do it again at another theater. I won't name the director or the theater. But we tried to replicate the production, which you really mustn't do. You have to sort of start fresh. But none of the notes were hit properly. And I became sort of a witch. So I said, that's not the way it's supposed to be. I said, oh, Lord, I couldn't let the other one go. Right. And so it sort of taught me try not to do a production again unless you really feel that you're going to be in the right hands.
It's interesting. They're almost like children. Everyone has got to be their own self. Every performance, every production has got to be its own production and not be an echo of the previous one.
That's right.
That's so interesting. In 1990, you did Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, which is a beautiful evocation, haunting evocation of life between the wars, based on two novels from 1959 and 1969, one Mr. Bridge, one Mrs. Bridge, and it's a Merchant Ivory film. Grace, your character, is such a haunting figure of sort of what women's lives, your mother's generation, you know, of the 30s, sort of had to face in their lack of choices, and what that sort of cost is to them. What was it like approaching that role and acting with Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman?
Well, with Paul Newman and Joanne, that was a gift. I mean, Joanne was extraordinary. I had a really difficult scene with Joanne that I spent hours preparing for, where I had to sort of fall apart because this character that I played ultimately kills herself. So it was such a workout, and just to look into those eyes, those gorgeous china doll eyes of Joanne, gave me so much of what I needed in that scene. And Paul it was great. She, as well as I, have been involved in the environment for me, 50 years, helping with start recycling, and many people in New York and in Los Angeles, Santa Monica. And so we did a little PSA for the Kansas City paper and the news at lunchtime. And we gave up the lunch to do it because we thought it was important to get the word out. And Paul kept saying, Joanne, come in, your lunch is here. I mean, he just adored her. That relationship was so extraordinary. And I had to tell this funny little tidbit that Bruce and I were married 33 years when he died. And people would say, that's kind of a record in show business. How did you, not that I think it is, but I guess among people in show business. And they said, they said to Bruce, who was a very funny man, how did you manage to have such a good marriage for 3 years? And Bruce said, well, we never wanted to get a divorce at the same time. He was a character, yeah.
How funny. Is it interesting going onto a set with, like, had you known Joanne and Paul prior to the film? Had you met them earlier?
I had known them a bit in Williamstown, and Paul worked very hard at the Westport Playhouse, refurbishing that. The both of them living in Westport, and I knew. I actually was offered. Oh, here we go again. I was supposed to learn all this before I came here, but I didn't know what you were going to ask. It actually ended up being that wonderful Charlotte Rampling played the part, but I normally don't ever do this because I don't think it's bad. I think it's bad manners to say what you turn down, and other actors have done it, but I really did want to do The Verdict. I was offered The Verdict with Paul. But this is an example, another reason I think Bruce was so adamant about letting people out to do it. It was one day I was going to miss in Germany doing It was the backup to what is that series?
Oh, is that the Third Reich? Was that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Good for you. I'm going to take you everywhere I go. Please. Inside the Third Reich, and the producer wouldn't let me out.
Wow.
So I missed a day, and Sidney Lumet said, I wish I could wait for you, but I have to go ahead.
Wow.
And so that's the only reason. It's not that I turned it down.
Yeah.
It's that I wasn't.
Right, because they were just, obviously their schedule was such that they were not willing to do that.
They couldn't do it.
In 91, we were talking about Barbra Streisand a couple of seconds ago with Meet the Fockers, but she was your director for The Prince of Tides, your second Pat Conroy adaptation. What was it like working for her? And that must have been like an experience as well, having a female director and having at that moment in time,
You
right?
know, what a gift that was. She, having, and as she is an actor, she really understands what an actor goes through. And I was having a lot of trouble with one emotional scene, and she was so patient. A lot of directors wouldn't be, but she was great, and she was wonderful. And she's a very funny woman. She doesn't even know she's funny, but she's just great. And then I introduced her when she was given the honor at the New York Film Society, and I talked about how she always wants to know what there is to eat. She's got a. She's so funny. She's really, really great. But she just stood up and gave the most extraordinary speech. She so understands politically what, well, we have the same sensibility, of course.
She has an appearance in the documentary that opened our festival, which is called Mike Wallace is Here, where it's her and Mike Wallace are bantering both, and the clip that you see that made it, and then the kind of the behind the scenes stuff. It's very funny, and it's just the way she's kind of going at him. It's terrifically combative. Yeah.
She's sharp, and she's just a generous woman. You know, I think she sometimes gets a reputation for being difficult only because she's a perfectionist, and she knows exactly. You know, in a lot of cases, a man might not be accused of that, but I think in her case, I remember this was in the 80s.
Prince of Tides is 91. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Hello. All right. Hello. Yes. Well, at that point, still, and some of the crew, I was there at the very beginning of the shoot, and they were giving her a little bit of a hard time, but she was such a lady.
Yeah.
She never lost her cool, and then I think they came to respect her a lot after the initial groundbreaking. Right. I mean, the ice breaking.
Yeah. In throughout the 90s, you obviously, as Gwyneth became an actress in her own right, you guys, it's interesting that you kind of have only really done Sylvia together. Have you guys wanted to kind of pursue a few more projects together? Because that's a terrific combo of you playing Sylvia Plath's mother, Aurora.
We did a mini-series. Here we go again. We did a mini-series, and it was called... It was about the game. This young man, it's a true story, Matt, hello. He killed his father and about to kill his mother. It's based on a novel. The man lives in Williamstown. Ay. It'll come to me. It's right on. My husband used to say, your synapses are doing this. Right. And just as they're about to touch. What the heck was the name of that thing? But, huh?
Blood relatives sound right?
No. Keep coming. Bring it in. Oh, anyway, I remember looking at my daughter, who played the very mysterious daughter. They still don't know whether she was culpable or had anything to do with this. What was that game they all played? Dragons and Dungeons. It was based on, and he that's was the thing that these kids were playing, and he killed the father and tried to kill the mother. Okay. No. It'll come anyway. I remember looking at my daughter on a close-up. I had to give her my lines off camera to give her, and I remember thinking, who in the world is this girl? Who's this actress? Until I realized it was my daughter. She has always had this extraordinary talent with, she just was born with it, that she just could delve so deep. So I'm always a bit on the fence. I'm thrilled with her success, her business success. She loves it. But I think something about winning that Oscar for Shakespeare in Love, she just kind of thought, well, I've done that. And I mean, I'm amazed with that. I work so hard at trying to just connect and make, and it just comes so easily to her. So I'm hoping as the children get older, and she's been a great mother, that maybe she'll come back to some of those deeper roles, because she can access the depth so effortlessly. It's really extraordinary.
She's very present in the world, which I really love. She has a very connectedness to her, I feel like. Let's talk about Jake, obviously, as well, your other child. Yeah, as a director, I thought The Young Ones was terrific, and his career as a director behind the camera is interesting as well, that he chose a different path, kind of a little bit more like his father, right?
Yes, but Bruce used to say he would take Jake to this set, I guess, even back at the White Shadow when he was really little, and he'd look at the dailies, and he'd say, that's the best one, Daddy. And he said he was always right. So they both, I love that very much.
That's great. In 2001 came another Tony nomination for Follies. You played Phyllis in Follies with Judith Ivey also as Sally, so you guys reunited there. And what was that experience like? I mean, obviously one of the ideas of Follies is that nostalgia is sort of a trap. Which sort of belies sort of what we're doing here, but I love that idea that, like, you've got to keep on moving forward and kind of live in the present. What was that performance like to kind of dive into in 2001?
I wish I had had another life as a musical comedy person, because working with all those young kids, I was stretching before I came on. So it reminds me of how that extraordinary life force that dancers have, and these young kids and sing. I adored it. I would love to have had the chance to do more of those. That was really a good experience. But again, I always had terrible trouble with, I don't think my motor skills are very well, so the rest of the company, we'd be doing this big dance number, and I, more often than not, was out of step, so I guess it wasn't meant to be.
Right, we just stand in the back, and they won't be able to see you back there, right? Well, this is around the same time as 2001 that you started on Will and Grace as Eric McCormick's. We're talking about, yes.
Yeah.
Which a role that inevitably got you an Emmy win, and
Did it?
I'm sorry, 2 Emmy nominations, which adds up to
that's right.
In my mind, that's
right.
a win. 2 Emmy nominations,
and for Huff, it was the.
For Huff, you got the win. But we're talking about like comedy, and I think the notion of comedy on television, especially around that time, it was so precise, and you're terrific on the show, jumping into that sort of ensemble and doing that. What was that? What was sort of the energy like in doing that?
Well, they're the most generous group, and having come back to it after 10 years, they're so bright, and they're so giving, and so funny. I love, again, let's sitting and watching them at the read-throughs and the rehearsals. Yeah. They're just, and they know this character's blindfolded now. That was tremendous fun. And when you're given those kinds of lines, I mean, it's just sort of, it's guaranteed that you're going to get a great laugh. And they're so talented, so funny people. I love it.
We brought up Huff, which is a great time to segue into that, because you did win for Huff. That was actually, there was a year you won for Huff, and you were nominated for Will and Grace.
That's right.
And as Hank Azaria's mother, that's a phenomenal performance as well. That show is so funny. That is, it's an edgy kind of comedy, and it's a very modern kind of comedy. It must have taken maybe a little bit of a different approach to kind of meld in with what's going on there, right?
Well, people often say this about projects, but they say it was before its time. I don't know about that. I guess things are edgier now. But it was kind of unique back then, and it was, playing with Oliver Platt and Hank, it was phenomenal. I mean, I'm really fortunate. There have only been a few clinkers. Those are the ones I don't want anybody to see. They say, I've seen everything you've done. I went, oh, I hope not. Because I'd like to burn a few of them.
Well, that was actually like such a great moment for you, because not only were those 2 Emmy nominations going, you got a Drama Desk nomination for Suddenly Last Summer, another Tennessee Williams, and that was 2005 or 6 or so. Like, what was going on in that season for you? That was just, there was so much productivity and so many accolades.
I have no idea. Thank goodness you're here. I've forgotten all. I never know the consecutive. I mean, I forget about when things are. But it was just, it was active. I always think people took pity on me after Bruce died. He died in 2002, and all of a sudden I just had all the barrage of work. It was extraordinary. So I'm very grateful to friends and strangers.
We should mention now, we talked about this last night, that April is Oral Cancer Awareness Month,
Yes.
obviously, which is obviously very important because
Yes.
that's what Bruce died of. Let's talk about your involvement in that and how crucial it is for people to
Yeah.
know.
Well, this is the month, oral cancer, and I really do urge everyone to go on, written out, oralcancerfoundation.org to access information about free scannings. Your dentists are supposed to do it. A lot of people don't know about it because it's a disease that's not talked about very much. But one person dies every hour, 24/7, around the clock, of oral cancer. And it used to be thought of as an old man's disease, smokers and drinkers, but now it's kind of an epidemic among young people, and they attribute that to sex. And oral sex specifically, the HPV virus. And so we sort of urge people to get pre-teen, well, no, what do we call those people? Not yet active.
The like pre-vaccinated or the pre-tested?
The pre-teens, or
preteens,
before active sexually, to get the Gardasil. I know there's so much in the news about vaccines, but this is one that has really been proven to prevent cancer. I don't think there are many that claim that. But the Oral Cancer Foundation is a wonderful group. And there's the Bruce Paltrow Fund under that, that specifically gives people, the inner city people, access to free scannings. Yeah. But when you go to your dentist for the checkup, always make sure to ask for it, because it's, that's where it is. Yeah. Lurks all around there.
Very important to absolutely get tested for it. Around that time, afterwards, around 2010, in researching you, that was sort of the time when all these young filmmakers sort of came to you or discovered you or wanted you in their projects. Bart Freundlich in The Myth of Fingerprints, Edward Burns, obviously eventually Brett Haley. In working with you, you seem to like working with young filmmakers, and there's sort of this great, obviously, connection that they have with you. You guys get on perfectly, and these roles really sparkle.
Well, there's only a handful of us that are older ladies, and we all have to play grandmothers, and I even played a great-grandmother here we go, in New Orleans a few years ago. The young woman who was in the show last night.
Emily Mortimer.
I love Emily. She's a neighbor, actually.
Oh, is she? Okay.
But I'm thinking, actually, of... I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, I don't blame you for looking at your watch. So, it's terrible to forget that. I don't mean to embarrass you. I'm sorry. I'm going to find you. Oh, you're only a year? All right. Well, you're forgetting.
You know what I love you? And I love you in Hello, I Must Be Going with Melanie Linsky.
Whoa.
Which is a wonderful...
I'm impressed.
Yeah, you
don't even have... Oh, we have a few notes.
A few notes, otherwise it's all in here.
That was a lot of fun, too. Yeah. What I enjoyed most about the business, I think, is playing a real range, and that's why I like being, as I say, a company member. I've never been really striving to... That's why I'll See You in My Dream was such a surprise for me, because I never expected to play leads, and I love hiding behind my characters. I'm just always, that's the big attraction to me, is to constantly play different people. I did this year, came out last year, What They Had, playing an Alzheimer's mother with Hilary Swank and Michael Shannon, and that was a thing I had never done before. So I always look for, even at this old age, I'd love to. I think it's what keeps me young. It's constantly reaching out and taking things that I haven't done before.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about I'll See You in My Dreams, which is so wonderful. And let's have a round of applause for that amazing film.
Oh, did you well?
It's so special.
You really all saw it? Did you see it here? Because so many people have missed it, although it's still, with all this streaming and all these, I guess you can still see it.
You can always find it, right. And you were nominated for a Gotham Award at the edgy sort of Gotham Awards that year in New York. There's scenes at the beginning of you and Bruce, actually, on the piano for Carol, that's in your character. And one of the things I love about that film is there's this beautiful dialogue that you have with Martin Starr about living in the moment. What do people mean by that? And I think it's interesting. What does it mean for you to sort of live in the moment? Because that film is really about sort of appreciating where you are in life in some ways, right?
I have a best friend. I have two best friends on either coast, and they're both social workers. Oh. And one is very much, they're both one is a Quaker, one is very much into Buddhism, and she said, I think every morning, be here now, and that's all that we should think about, not worrying about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen. I mean, as older people, it's difficult not to think about the future and how are we going to cope, or our children be around. I try very hard to be independent, and I keep thinking I don't want to have them have to take care of me. Hopefully will be independent enough financially that I won't have to ask for their help. I don't want to go that route at all, but I think it's being here and now, if you can, and just. I find a lot of the worry that I had as a younger woman, even a few years ago, is kind of falling away, because I do that as a mantra every morning.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, and I was always so self-critical. That was a dumb thing you said, and no, you're not. Why are you? And I'm trying just to get rid of that. I am what I am. I'm not going to be changing. I wasn't the best mother in the world. I wasn't the best actress. I tried my best. And that's all you can really expect. I mean, that you don't just cut off at that, but you keep searching how you can be better, but not to agonize and stress over it.
Right, and that's in the film as well, with Malin Ackerman playing your daughter, and that friendship, which becomes a romance with the amazing Sam Elliott, is that year's 2015's best romance in my view. It's amazing. Had you and Sam known each other prior to that?
No, and I was so nervous about kissing him. I think we had to do the first scene and that big white mustache. I said, oh my gosh, what's that going to be like? But he was so. I have never kissed a man with a mustache before.
Might not be able to get out of that mustache, right?
Yes, lost in the weeds. But he couldn't have been sweeter and lovelier, and it was great.
Yeah.
He was a great kisser.
Yeah. Well, the rapport that you guys have, I love it with the scene when he pulls up and you just say yes, and you give him your phone number so quickly, and just the ease that the two of you have there. But you're also, like, your character, you're so sharp. As you mentioned, you're in every scene, but you're just like, you sort of beat him to the punch, and you say, here's what, okay, you want to remember my number? And you're like, 818, blah, blah, and you rattle off really fast.
And he remembers it.
And he does, yeah. Well, I would too. Who wouldn't, right? Yeah.
I wouldn't.
No. And you talked about what they had, which last year I did a couple of Q&As with Hilary Swank and Robert Forster for the film, and it's really a beautiful film. No, it was in New York, but it's really a beautiful film, and it takes place in the Midwest, and it's about a family dealing with their mother who has Alzheimer's and their father who sort of refuses to sort of let go of their independence. And it was workshopped a lot. The writer-director is a playwright, and she really did a phenomenal job. How did you come to that project, and what was that like?
Well, I was nervous about that because I always think you have to do research if you're playing someone you've never played before, and I knew nothing about Alzheimer's. Thank God that was not in our family. And I was asked, as so many indies often do come together quickly, and they'd ask me if I do it, and I said, I don't think I can do this because I don't want to do it just halfway. But Michael Shannon, who had been in Young Ones with my son, is such a phenomenal actor. I think you all know Michael Shannon. He's in so many great things now, and he loved working with Jake, and he said, I got to talk to your mother. She has to do this role. So he actually talked me into it, because I thought I'm working with a first-time director who wrote it. Her beloved grandmother, who just passed away last year, had Alzheimer's, and she wrote it so lovingly, her attention to her grandmother. So I'm really happy I joined on forces. I just had to say to her many takes, what do I do now? Yeah. Because we didn't have rehearsal time, as you have so little rehearsal time, if any, when you're doing independent films. The schedule's so fast, the budget's so slim. You just have to keep moving. Yeah. But she's heaven. She's a beautiful girl. She's a beautiful actress, too.
Yeah. I would recommend anybody find that one as well, because what they had is really special.
And it's on airplanes. A lot of people have seen it on airplanes. In the past, that was always thought of, if you go to an airplane, you've lost it. But you know what? It's happening more and more. With the great Santini, was known initially as another title, and they went right to the airplane. Right. And in those days, it was considered that was a failure.
It was called The Ace. That was
that's
the
right, The Ace.
Yeah.
But it resurrected, and I think it's been seen much more. But now, so many films are seen on airplanes, are streamed on iTunes, on Amazon, and I think you can see that.
Yeah, which is great. Just the more accessibility for great titles like that. And one more final note on that, which is that your performance in there is so beautiful because as Robert Forster playing your husband is sort of wanting to take care of you, your character it gets sort of sweet and childlike, but there's also this sort of sense of almost constant rediscovery that she's going through, and it's just a remarkable performance. You mentioned your research. Do you like to do a lot of research for your roles? How much do you get into?
I like to do some. I mean, I've played a few women who've lived. I played Mrs. Lou Gehrig in a TV film. She was very much alive. This was the 80s, early 80s, I believe. And she came backstage. I was doing a play at the time at the Brooklyn Academy, and she came backstage and she said, "Now, I want you to," she was real strong. She said, "I don't want you to play her like Teresa Wright," because even though she was exquisite, she said, "That wasn't me at all. I was always a tough cookie. So play her like a tough cookie." And of course, the script was already written, so I couldn't do. But I kept that in mind to give her a little bit more gusto. And afterwards, she said, "Okay, girl, you did it." It was a television film with. Sadly, also we lost Edward Herman, who I've done a lot with. He played Lou Gehrig.
Yeah, and that Teresa Wright film was part of the Yankees, of course.
Oh my gosh, with Gary Cooper. It was a beautiful film.
Oh. And we're going to take some questions from the audience in a moment, but we need to talk about the amazing film that you're here with this time, which is The Tomorrow Man with John Lithgow. And it's a very interesting film. I really like it. It connects to me because he is a hoarder, but also a prepper. He likes to kind of get things. He is preparing for some eventuality that he seems to need to find comfort in knowing that he's got everything prepared. Water, electricity, he's got everything prepared for any sort of catastrophe. And the two of you strike up a friendship and a romance, but he thinks your character is also a prepper, when in fact you're just using cash because it's easier. You can't remember credit card numbers and things like that.
That's right.
How did this film come to you? This is such a
well,
great film.
the minute I heard John was attached, I said, "Oh, I have to do this," because I have adored him forever. John Lithgow is an extraordinary actor. He's on Broadway right now in previews with, what is her name? Phenomenal actress. Thank you very much. Will you come with me too on my tour? Laurie Metcalf, who's an extraordinary actress, and I can't wait to see that. We've almost worked together a few times. He actually was asked to do Betrayal, but it didn't work out. So I thought, I'm at this age, I have to jump at this. And also, actually, we're both with anonymous content, which is an unusual. I think more and more agencies are doing this. They're actually producing and developing films and packaging their actors, which is
great.
Which is great.
Yeah, it's very smart.
So that's how that came to me.
Yeah,
for our mutual.
And for this kind of character, I mean, she obviously has to kind of come at it from a different way than Lithgow's character, but he has to learn from her about, like we were talking about, living in the moment. But he does it in his own way, and the two of you really kind of come to a bit of an impasse, teaching him a little bit more about living in the moment, right?
Yes. And what is the wonderful thing, the quote that I heard, that old age, it's really companionship, I think, as you're heading towards the end of your life, if you're lucky enough to. It's a very lonely time for a lot of people who are alone. And, the rates of survival of people who've lost their spouses or have been alone all their lives is much higher of not surviving. Yeah. So I think there was this really great quote that said, the problem with old age is that it's the only stage that you will never, you can't look forward to another stage. That is, and you wonder what will happen, what will become of it. Yeah. So I think companionship is, I'm really fortunate because I have my little grandchildren right around the corner in New York. And the big ones are in LA, so I'm back and forth. But it's, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's great. It's a very sweet, beautiful film. It sounds a little kind of, he's a prepper, he's kind of preparing for that, but it's actually got a lot of sort of humor and very gentleness, and it's a really wonderful film. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Glad you like it.
If anybody has any questions, shoot up a hand. Yes. I'll repeat the question back. It's in the hat. We'll go you two first. Sure.
First of all, it was Cooled Out.
What did you say? Oh, you're right. Cooled Out.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Did you look it up or did you remember?
Aha. Well, that's not fair, though, that he looked it up on the computer.
Sam Elliott once said on the talk show, he's so chronicle cool, like, you know what I mean, chronicle. And he was saying that his wife, who was a beautiful Catherine Moss, said that she had aged down. She wasn't getting work at 40. And then years later, I heard Helen Mirren make a comment that the problem in the United States is, and I can't directly quote this, that women here, she's always deemed as hot, sexy. She said, why can't they use the word talented, passionate, and she said in Great Britain, they are allowed to age.
That's
not
right.
necessarily just play. You talked about grandmother, great grandmother. They have characters. Look at Maggie Smith, was she 105 by now? But really, consistently working. So I'm wondering, you're a beautiful woman. You've worked in, what, 50 years? Have you
50.
felt that? Because I remember Sam Elliott seemed almost upset by that for his wife.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't remember. Well, you know, it's also changed a lot since then, because I remember having dinner once with Leslie Caron at a dinner party, and this is back in the 80s, and she said, oh, bonjour. I can't do a French accent, but she said, you are 30, forget it, you have to leave Hollywood. But that has changed so much, and Catherine's so beautiful. She actually has a role in The Hero, I believe,
That's right, she does, yeah,
with Sam. Yeah. But well, speaking of the English, it's so in their DNA, those extraordinary women, they don't worry about facelifts and all of that. But unfortunately, the pressure in this country is, I've played with so many younger people that sometimes I have to do a little caretaking. But the pressure, well, those women are phenomenal. You know, Maggie and Judi Dench, and they are very comfortable in their own skin. They don't have the American disease, luckily.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to, first of all, just say that as a woman of a certain age, I really appreciate that you do forget the occasional date and the occasional night.
Occasional? Well, as long as I'm surrounded with the likes of you that pick up the...
I want to hopefully remember the question I was going to ask. Your daughter accepted an award when your husband was ill, and I remember, I'll never forget actually, that she got emotional as she said, my dad had a tough year.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if there's something that you can say that taught them, or that your husband imparted something that he passed on to them, because they lost him before they...
Well, he was really the heart of the family. He was, before, when we were married, he was a struggling young writer and producer. We did a play together, and that didn't go, and so he didn't find his success until quite a few years, and so he was pretty much a home dad, and I was out doing these multiple things, and so they bonded so extraordinarily that I was so grateful for him for being there, and he was just always he always had great advice. He just was, he was just exceptional, and as I said, the heart of the family, I feel.
And if anybody hasn't seen Duets, which is the film that Bruce directed with Gwyneth, and it's wonderful, it's from 2002. It's really wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
We saw you in the Manhattan Theatre Club production of Country House.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And it's written about a movie star who has spent 20 years, quote, in the Berkshires, quote, at a certain theater, which was obviously
Williamstown.
And I'm just wondering if they wrote it with you in mind, or if you came to it after it was written.
I came to it after it was written, actually. But yeah, I think that he had been working on that a while. It was very, very much Chekhovian after the, the Seagull and Uncle Vanya. And so the Cherry Orchard. So I remember at the first reading saying, why aren't we just doing the Cherry Orchard? Because it was so close. But yeah, I don't think he may have had me way in the back of his mind, but I don't think specifically. I don't know.
The New York Times called you majestic in that play, by the way. And
what?
the Majestic, the New York Times called you
Ooh,
majestic
say it
in
again.
that play. Majestic. The majestic Blythe Danner.
Are
That's how
you
it should always
sure?
be.
I
Like
don't
the
remember.
invincible Iron Man, the majestic
That I really
Blythe Danner.
forgot.
And a year after that, it's just worth noting, in 2015, that's when you were inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame,
Oh,
which
yes.
was such a tremendous
That
thing.
was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Those are some of the perks about when you're getting old. Yeah.
We have time for about one more. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but I first of all, thank you very much for being here. You're beautiful and articulate. There's just two things I want to share with you because we have one person in common that, and he was my babysitter. I grew up in Manhasset, and it's Kenny Howard.
Oh, Kenny.
And The White Shadow was based on Manhasset, so there's a very vested interest that I have and love for you and your family. And now I forgot. My son is a teacher of costuming at Bard College at Simon's Rock, and since you're a Bard College person, I thought I would share that with you.
Oh,
It's a
great.
fabulous institution, and they do a great job.
They really do. Bard is. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Kenny.
Yeah.
Without much of a question, so everyone loves this mundane question, and that is, who is your favorite leading actor to kiss?
Oh, to kiss. Well, I guess the most recent. I don't remember
Sam's
them all.
mustache.
Sam.
Right, yeah, right, yes.
Sam, but Raoul on stage, Raoul Julia was a great kisser. And I got to do that for several months in a row. Ooh, it was, yeah. So, Kenny, Kenny in The White Shadow used Bruce in his hands and there's a little bit of the Brooklyn accent. He really did base that on Bruce. And and Bruce was in Great Neck and he was in Manhasset, so they had that in common. He was quite wonderful. Kenny was a brilliant actor, and so I remember seeing him in a musical, and he was huge. He was 6'4" or something, and he moved. Just I couldn't get over this beautiful tall guy moving like Fred Astaire.
And he was in
a
1776
sweetheart.
too in the film, I believe, right? 1776.
Yeah,
He's
that's
bring
right.
it all
He
full
played
circle.
Thomas
That's
Jefferson.
Right.
and
Right before you guys did the Adams
That's
Rib
right.
TV series. Just to wrap it up, we just mentioned Bard College. Was there something that you learned at Bard College that you still carry with you to this day, Blythe, that you sort of think about from your acting classes from your days?
Gosh,
that
they
you
were.
just-
We had phenomenal acting teachers. We had one from the English school, the London, and Charlie Kakasakis, who is another Greek. Oh, that's the one they said. Charlie Kakasakis meant cheats at checkers. That's it. Not Nikos Sakaropoulos. But Kakasakis sounds more like cheats at
Sounds
checkers.
like a Dr.
right?
Seuss poem. I like that.
Yeah, but they all were. He was the method. They were great. But actually, some of the things I take with me even more so are my philosophy teacher, Introduction to Philosophy. It was Heinrich Blücher, who was married to Hannah Arendt, who wrote The Banality of Evil. So those classes, the philosophy classes there, were extraordinary. They had phenomenal teachers, and they still do. Bart gave me a lot of sort of ground to stand on as far as that goes.
Yeah, and it informs all your performances, I'm sure, which then you pass on to us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.